Whoa, my camera's smudged. I guess it looks a little better now. I guess it's a little better. Yeah. It's marginally, you know. Doobity-doo-bity-doo-bity-doo-bity-doo-bity-doo-bity-doo. What's up, old enough? I'm going to set it to all messages so I can see everybody as they cycle in. What's up, everybody? Welcome in. Greetings. Salutations. I've got so much I want to do. And, you know, some things just take time. God! Just home from a road trip? Well, that's nice. Road trips are fun. Haven't been on one of those since I moved down here. Although really, living on the road was like one perpetual road trip. Living off of road trip foods and seeing road trip things. I guess it was pretty cool. But sometimes I still long for that, honestly. But I don't know. At this point in my life, I think I'm pretty adaptable. I think there's a version of the life I used to live on the road that I would really like to live. And I think that there's also modifications I can make to the life I'm living right now that would make it even more serviceable. Even better. Even gooder. Where'd you get off to? I hope it was somewhere fun. I hope it was somewhere cool, somewhere neat. You know, the great thing about living in North America is that you can take a road trip to 3 different countries, right? The United States, the United States of America, Canada, and Mexico. And I think you can cross the Panama Canal by car. I think. I'm not 100% sure on that one. Don't quote me. But, Big Spring, Texas, not far. Well, that's not too far, I guess. From what you've told me. But, that is not a Texas town I've ever heard of. Although, I will say this about Texas. As far as, like, experiencing it in real life myself, I've only been through it twice. Once was a cross-country trip from the East Coast to the West Coast, and another time was to go visit somebody in San Antonio, and then to do a weird little folk punk appearance kind of show thing in... Where was it? Somewhere east of Amarillo. But my experience of Texas was this. Number one, there are like 7 notable cities in Texas. Number 2, every other city in Texas thinks it's notable, but is really a ploopsville. And 3, the magic of these towns is not readily apparent to me. Now, here's the thing about Texas, right? I know from the cultural output of that place that there's something that speaks to people there. But the only thing that Texas speaks to in me is the desire to get the fuck up out of Texas, right? It's just hot. Like, to me, Texas is just miserable heat. Army Corps of Engineers made a lake there. Well, that's cool. I love that the Army Corps of Engineers gets up to stuff like that, you know? Dude, the Army Corps of Engineers is a interesting. It's an interesting aspect of our government, right? Sometimes I think the Army Corps does some really good work and some really interesting projects, and other times the Army Corps of Engineers is really not, you know, really not the organization to be trusted with certain infrastructure projects, I think. But I don't know, like, it's weird. If you look at the channelization of, okay, so here's what I think, right? Maybe the Army Corps of Engineers is just not the best suited organization for working on canals and shit like that, because it doesn't seem like the two examples that I'm most familiar of have both failed and caused billions of dollars of economic damage. So the canal system and the levee system in New Orleans was an Army Corps of Engineers project, as was the channelization of the Missouri River. Both of these projects would later go on to fail and to result in billions of dollars of economic loss and loss of life in some cases. So, oh man, but they do occasionally do things that are kind of neat to see, at least. Yeah. So did you guys hear about this shadow president thing? Elon Musk using his massive sway over Twitter and his massive financial capital to basically get some legislation completely shut down. This is the fucking craziest development of America's dystopian oligarchy arc that I've personally yet seen, right? So typically, when billionaires want to buy an election or when they want to buy some legislation, right, they've got to go through a PAC or they've got to go through a lobbyist or a lobbying organization. In this case, Musk is basically just using his power and position and money to influence the results of a political process, which it sucks that I even need to say this, but this would be wrong regardless of Elon Musk's politics. There's a reason why I'm not bringing up all of his politics just yet, and honestly, I don't think I need to make this argument. Regardless of what Elon Musk thinks on a goddamn thing, I don't think that America should be operated on the basis of who can pay for the best, or I'm sorry, who can afford the best lawyer, who can pay for the best lobbying group. I don't think that should determine policy in America. I think that discourse should determine policy in America. I think that intelligent discussion and engagement with the issues should determine policy in America. And I understand that a lot of policy in America is not determined that way, that it is indeed determined on the basis of billionaire whims, but honestly, I prefer it to be a little more hidden than this. Just kind of a sad thing to see, right? In my opinion, it represents kind of an admitting. It's like an admittal that America has become a place where you pay to win. You know, you pay to win the hearts and minds of the people. You don't argue. That's what lobbyists do. Kind of funny, though. We, the citizens, need to get as bold and stand up for ourselves. I 100% agree there. And you know what's crazy, old enough, is the fact that, like, I feel like you and me and a bunch of other fucking regular people are all kind of saying this shit right now. And I'm ready anytime, right? It's just weird to me to the give me 1 second. We're gonna do that, right? Because I think increasingly what gets me is that I feel like on all sides there is kind of a desire right now to rise up and to set things right and to take some of the power that's been stripped from us as people back. Now, to me, the biggest obstacle around uniting these people is coming up with a set of issues that speaks to people's immediate needs and immediate needs and cuts through all the bullshit, cuts through any sort of annulled argument, any sort of prearranged response to those ideas, if that makes sense. I think number one has to be universal health care. And I think there need to be no more than 5 goals that we shoot for. Some of the other ideas that I've been throwing around is a universal food stipend. See, the thing is, I've got a million ideas, right? I've got a million ideas for how we might improve this country, but the hard part to find is encapsulating what we as a country need the people in power to do immediately to get things set upright. Politicians used to be voted in to work for us, right? We just vote against things now, old enough, and that's one of the problems, right? And the reason we vote against things is because we have nothing to vote for. We vote against things because we are dominated by the era of the politics of fear. We vote against Trump because we don't want that orange fascist to win. We vote against Joe because we're sick of his malaise on the economy. We vote against Harris because she's a cop. We vote against Trump because he's going to start mass deportations, right? We vote against these things. We don't vote for anything because neither of these politicians' visions are encouraging enough for either. Like, honestly, average people in America can't really get behind either of the visions that were laid out. Number one, the Democrats didn't really lay out any vision this year. And number two, the vision that the Republicans laid out was not exactly a great vision, right? So we need to inspire people to get out of this mindset. Education, healthcare. So for education, that's a good one. Okay, how do we boil that down, right? The question then becomes, how do we boil education reform down into a short little slogan? Because it needs to be something and cut to the core of it. And Well, it doesn't even need to be boiled down to a slogan just now, but how do we boil it down to a one-sentence policy position? What is the most fundamental problem with education? I would say that it's the standardization of education. It's the assumption that federal standards can work for every student across the board in all situations. It's the idea that you can paint with a broad brush when you're talking about students. I'm just going to drive all the way. I'm sorry. Sometimes I get doom-pilled that there will never be a working class uprising. People fear change, and even if the system sucks and is brutal, it's what people are familiar with. Yeah, but the thing is that change is coming regardless of whether people are ready for it or not. And I think it's when that change starts to really dawn on people that they will start to rise up. And I think, in my opinion, we're starting to see the first pitter-patters of that, in my opinion. If you look at the protests that erupted in 2020, if you look at the protests that erupted this year, if you look at the protests that have erupted over the last 10 years, right? There's a tea kettle in America, and it is heating up day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute. That tea kettle is getting hotter and hotter, and the steam generated is pouring through, and it's starting to whistle. And it is when that whistling reaches a full pitch, and people really start to tune into it, that you will see that populist working class uprising take place. But it is not until then, right? It cannot be before then. Because, like you said, people fear change, but people resent a status quo that kills them. And also, there's a strange thing that happens when you change conditions over time, right? If you change someone's conditions sufficiently gradually, you may convince them that indeed either nothing has changed or that things changed so slowly that there's an entirely rational explanation to the way that they changed, right? If you what was I gonna say? Fuck. Okay, yeah, so if you change someone's conditions sufficiently slowly enough, you might just convince them that there's nothing to fear about the change that has happened. That the change that they've undergone, even if that change to their conditions has worsened their conditions entirely, they may indeed end up believing, well, there was just no other way, or that was just what happened, that's just the way it played out. But if you don't change them slowly enough, if it's slow but fast enough that people can look back over if people can look back over the last 10 or 20 years and see that sort of negative change playing out within their lifetime, indeed, within small chunks of their lifetime, then people are more likely to realize at some point how that change has fucked them over, how that change has destroyed them, change that they allowed to happen, mostly because they were unaware of the mechanisms by which it was happening, because it was presented in the right ways. But once it reaches a fever pitch, once they are made aware of how much they've sacrificed to get where they are, then that's when you start to see real change, right? You're pretty for a chubby girl. Well, thanks. Thanks. Everyone learns differently. I 100% agree. Exactly. Fear changes, they do. They accept brutality to avoid change. I tend to agree. I think that this I feel like this country has, I feel like to a large extent, um, because of just the sheer oppressiveness of working conditions in the modern day, and the sheer oppressiveness of living in modern society, we have become very complacent because it's hard to dedicate time to thinking about these things. It's hard to find people to talk, to about them. It's hard to learn about them if you don't know where to start, right? And as a result, we've become increasingly more complacent. Add to that the fact that social media has basically taken over the area of the public space. Add to that the fact that people's conditions are so much worse in comparison to how they were 50 years ago, and you have a population whose pacification is living on borrowed time, basically. I think people will rise up, but what I fear, I guess, is I fear that it will take massive shortages to really get people to rise up around an economic issue. And in order for there to be massive shortages, there's going to have to be crop failures. There's going to have to be really shitty weather. It's going to be a pretty fucked up year to live, no matter what situation you live in or no matter what state you live in. But I think it's going to take something like that. And I think at that point, people might actually stand a pretty good chance of rising up and maybe overtaking some of these systems, maybe taking some of their power back. Social media is a thief, a silent thief. It is. It's a thief of your life energy. It's a thief of your self-esteem. It's a thief of your self-worth. It's a silent but deadly thief. Steals your data too. How about that? Turns you from a human being into a unit of marketing. Ain't that great? Ain't that lovely? Thanks, Edward Bernays, for introducing the theory of the fucking focus group. Fuck that guy, man. It prevents young parents from giving time to babies. Necessary facial expressions and talking skills are delinquent. I believe this is why kids can't read, speak, or control their emotions. Old enough, you don't just believe that. I mean, you might just believe that, but this is one of those cases where your assumptions about what social media are doing are 100% correct. That is what social media does. According to the studies, what limited studies have been done on the topic so far, social media has a massively delinquent effect on facial expression, on body language, on the ability to communicate, on the ability to empathize with other human beings. It has massively deleterious effects on one's self-esteem and um, self-perception, right? It's just, it's incredibly toxic for anyone to be on, much less a child. And, I 100% agree with the idea that it takes young parents away from their kids. I cannot tell you how many times I've been hanging out with young parents who are kind of like terminally addicted to social media and their kids play on tablets all day. And that's kind of how the fucking work of the household goes. And, like I do these streams probably, I would say 7 or 8 hours a week I spend streaming, probably. Usually in the morning while I'm doing my chores, or at night after everything is done, and, after my kid, once they're born, will have gone to bed. But I think the fact that I pretty much only use my phone outside of that for listening to music and listening to podcasts, or like watching movies or something, like background noise kind of shit, I am not a scroller. Like, I guess late at night I'll get into scrolling some shorts, but it's not something that I spend like the daytime doing, If I'm on my phone during the day, it's because I'm bored in a situation I really can't get out of, and I just want something to look at, and usually even then, I'm either scrolling through YouTube Shorts, which I guess is social media, but it's like topical social media. It's not, at least my feed isn't all like influencer based and shit. Outside of that, I'll be looking at like my Cash App, making calculations, looking at my schedule, seeing what hours I work and making plans, like that type of shit. But honestly, if I'm engaged in something, like if I'm interested in what I'm doing, then I don't, like, I'm not on my phone, like, I don't know. I'm not gonna speak with a like giant. No, I am gonna speak with a little bit of moral condemnation of people who live like that, because I think it is a bad way to be. I think being terminally addicted to social media is probably not the best for your mental or social health. It saddens me the sheer amount of children who are missing so much life from this. Oh, I 100% agree. Like, think about the amount of kids, right? Think about the amount of kids whose experience of going to the zoo is overlaid with a tablet in front of them. The whole time, they can't they can't take their fucking eyes away from the addiction from the addiction tablet in their hands. Like they can't tear their fucking eyes away from it. One of the most magical things to me about going to the zoo this last time I did it was just how many parents I did see not letting their kids do that. Which tells me that a lot of those parents raising their kids on fucking Kindles and tablets probably aren't going to the zoo and shit. But they're probably like going to the park. They're probably doing a lot of like bare minimum type shit and thinking that's fine. Because it's like, well, whatever. At least little Bobby is playing on his tablet outside in the park. It's like, that's not... Bro, no. Can you let your kid go explore the neighborhood and fucking smoke a joint behind their neighbor's house, please? For the sake of us all. We gotta live around this fucking fuck. Dude, I wish that's an aspect of parenting and shit that I wish more parents would consider. Is the fact that we gotta live with your dumbass kids. When you get done raising them, we gotta live with them. Okay? We're the one, like, the rest of society is the one who has to deal with your kids' fuck ups. Okay? And to me, that's a huge incentive to raise my kid right. So that I don't raise a kid who's a fucking nuisance, Or if they're a nuisance, I want them to be a nuisance in a, socially conscious based hippie way. Not in like a, ignorant douchebag kind of way. Oh no, what did I do? It has also obliterated people's attention span. Why you look like a boy? I love that people can't figure out my gender on here. That's great. I really do love that. It also, okay, yeah, no, 100%. That's one of the worst effects of social. God damn it, cat! No, fuck off. You can't be wubbing up against every little thing, okay? Anyway, to me, one of the most deleterious effects of social media is, in my opinion, the whole attention span thing. Because I do agree that it has shortened people's attention spans massively. And that's what the studies seem to indicate as well. Because nothing on social media is meant to take more than a minute to consume. YouTube being the only possible exception to that, you know. Every other social media that I can think of is pretty much based on the premise of very short content that you're meant to engage with for fucking 2 minutes and then click off of. And that used to be the world of content. And yeah, of course, children and adults raised on that type of media are not coming away with a huge attention span because they're never being asked to engage their attention span for longer than 60 seconds. And that's just not, like, if you have a book, I don't have one on me, right? But if you have a book, it demands your attention. You can turn it into a small little bite, but it insists you read more. It insists you continue to engage, you know? And that's something that no social media, like I said, besides YouTube, that does allow long-form content, none of them can really master that art, you know? Point being, this affects education possibilities and social skills. 100%. The lack of strong parental involvement and the dominance of social media in parenting environments has created, you know, in addition to just the shitty education system, has created kind of a miasma of bad shit when it comes to the next generation. Because the next generation is currently largely being raised by social media in schools that are way, way worse for them than mine were. And people were talking about how bad the education system was when I was in fucking school. Next year, as of May next year, it'll be 9 years since I graduated high school. So a decade ago, they were still talking, all this shit was still going on, and everybody was still talking about how education fucking sucked. In fact, I could go back and find you an amazing rant from 2015 about how much the education system sucked. I could go back and find you an amazing rant from the 90s. Carlin talking about how much education fucking sucked. And kids nowadays are getting a worse education than that. Okay? So, like, yeah, it's like a quadruple whammy. It's awful. You know, it's a situation that our society is completely unprepared to face. And it's just one of the many swords of Damocles hanging over our heads right now, collectively. You know, here's where I can see some federal standards in education. You want a federally standardized education? Here's how I'll allow it. Let's figure out, because there are some countries that have, really good education systems that produce really good results, and there are countries that have shitty education systems that produce shitty results. I think we need to look at the ones that have good results, which from my understanding would be countries like Japan, Denmark, Finland, Norway, Sweden, the Nordic countries, just kind of broadly. The UK apparently has a pretty high graduation rate, so I think we could look at some of these models and see, okay, is there a way of structuring school that works for everybody functionally? And is there a way of structuring school that works for everybody and that provides an outlet for those that it doesn't work for, that provides alternative solutions that provide good educations for them? And I know the answer to that is yes, right? If you want to federalize and standardize education on that in that way, then I might be down for that, okay? You want to set like a federal standard that your school policy cannot it can't ban this, and this. It must ban this, and this. It must allow this, and this. It cannot allow, you know what I mean? Like, if you want to standardize, if you wanted to standardize the culture of schooling, I think that would be one thing. But trying to standardize it by applying funds only to schools that reach certain test scores, that just ensures the kids are, and then making the tests what are standard, right? Making it so that schools are basically free to operate under whatever sets of policies and whatever sort of school culture they want to, adopt whatever uniform policies that they want to, etc., etc. But they have to follow rigid federal standards when it comes to what sort of educational material that they work from, what sort of curriculum they present, right? And I do think that there should be federal requirements on certain topics being covered. I think that's a good idea. But requiring a standard level test score before you get funding and insisting that every student be able to meet up to that, I think is pretty dumb. I think there might be a better way to assess how functional a given district might be. But I think too that if you federalize some of the things I think need to be federalized, like the administration process of these schools, if you made it just one big institution, it still locally recruits, that it's still got governance on its own, right? But I think that could be an option, like make it something that I don't know. I'm really not the thinker for this now that I think about it, honestly. There are things that I think we need to do when it comes to education, but when it comes to identifying the problems in administration, nah. Anyway, I gotta go.